Letter of the theologist Eletherios Gkoutzidis to the PSEUDO-ARCHBISHOP Nicholatians, Eletherios Gkoutzidis, theology professor. In Athens on 2/15, 3.04. 2. His Excellency Mr. Nikolaos Messiakaris, Your Eminence Mr. Nikolaos, through this open letter of mine, and in my capacity as a faithful member of the true Orthodox Church, as well as a founding member of the Holy Philanthropic Association of the Clergy, PSEUDO, but also as a theological advisor to the Holy Synod for 3 consecutive decades, and a worker in the Hieron of the Church of Agnes, I feel obliged and duty to address you the following on the occasion of your course since the past year, and finally also for the occupation of the parish church of the Holy Trinity in Lower Heliopolis. A. We have known each other personally since the 1960s, during which time we lived together in that substandard boarding school in Peristery. But we have also had close communication and cooperation since then, with me as a priest and then as a bishop, and my lack thereof in the above-mentioned capacities. During our long-term communication and cooperation in the common struggle, each from his position and nevertheless, both as members of the body of Christ, we mutually tolerated and covered each other's weaknesses and imperfections according to the Lord's command, bear one another's burdens, while we tried and cultivated in various ways the spirit of competition, but we also pursued love, peace, and unity. In 1971, I believe that you maintained a good stance on the issue of the so-called ordination, and at that official meeting of the 18th of October 1971, you condemned the deceased Kalliopeios Giannakouloulos, who secretly, through the then Corinthian Callistos, entered the space of the true Orthodox Church as the eparch of the Florinics. And then, however, and until 1974, as far as I remember correctly, you also maintained an orthodox stance, both on the issue of union with the Russian Synod of the Diaspora and on the so-called ordination. That is, you expressed your reservations as to whether that union had been canonically and orthodoxly carried out, and in particular how the so-called ordination was administered and how it was accepted. I recall that when the contradictory and blasphemous decision of the Russians, initially concealed by the Exarchate, came to light, you reacted strongly and pressured the hierarchs to seek explanations from the Russians of the Diaspora. Thus, oral and written statements emerged, such as that of the 30th of September 74 by the then Metropolitan Filaret, the president of the Russian Synod of the Diaspora, in which he assured that the so-called ordination was a non-essential but a completely external, formal act, which did not affect the ordinations either of 1935 or 1948. With those actions, the never recognized or implemented contradictory and absurd relative act of the Russian Synod, which was imposed on it by the then-known parasynodal Florin American background. I cannot, therefore, fail to confess that up to this point you have shown real zeal, as well as a member of the Exarchate, which went to America to verify whether the Synod of Russians in the Diaspora accepted and observes the ecclesiology of the true Orthodox Church, and what this so-called ordination was, etc. Despite this, the then Corinthian Callistos, after some years of retreat, accepted the so-called ordination as a schismatic, for which he was deposed as a blasphemer in 1977. You signed the historic decision of the deposition of Callistos as synodal hierarch, just as you had previously signed the cessation of church communion after the Russian Synod. Therefore, the act deposition against the sworn and fallen Corinthian Callistos took place because he retracted the first confession declaration in Omophory and Epitaph as a member of the Exarchate of September 1971, becoming a blasphemer according to both ecclesiology and apostolic succession. However, during the same period, the then new calendarist, Bishop of Piraeus, Chrysostomos Taladorakis, had sued you in the criminal courts with the accusation that you were counteracting the function of an orthodox and canonical bishop, according to him as an old calendarist, and denying your apostolic succession from the ordinations of 1935 and 1948, but also as a schismatic because you belong to the old calendarist schism, which was created in 1937 by Matthias of Bresthenes. You had, always according to him, an invalid hierarchy, for this reason he is requesting from the court your criminal prosecution and your removal. Then, publicly but also personally, you assured us that when questioned before the Council of Criminal Courts, you confessed that you are a bishop of the true Orthodox Church, and that you have valid and complete ordination, successively from the canonical ordinations of 1935 and 1948. In fact, you also mentioned that one of the appellate courts, or prosecutors, stood up and congratulated you for this confession of yours, and that in the end your case did not even reach the hearing, but you were acquitted of the charges, persecution by Parliament. Thus, for years you have been reviling and boasting of a triumphant and unprecedented victory, which at that time we had no reason to doubt. However, until 1998, we were unaware of your 5476 alternative will of the Piraeus Criminal Court, and only then, and quite by chance during the year just mentioned, did we see this published in the 11th volume of Patrios, which was published by the late Calliopios Giannakoulopoulos, when we literally fell in love. We were surprised because we saw that the Council of Criminal Courts of Piraeus recognized you as a canonical and valid bishop, and acquitted you by virtue and energy of the ordination of 1971. According to your acquitting will, this was done to you as if you were a schismatic, because, as we have already noted above, since 1937 you belonged to a second church, founded by Matthäus of Bresthenes, then excommunicated from the synod of the former Florina. The illegal, as if by schismatics, ordinations of 1935 and 1948, and therefore your own in 1973, were restored as a mystery through the laying on of hands of 1971. So this extremely false, deceptive, and above all, extremely blasphemous decision, you knowingly accepted and never presented, not even in 1981 at that great synod, in which the Bishop of the Church of Cyprus also participated, and which had this very issue of ordination. And I expressed the Catholic conscience of the Church, that both the Exarchate in America, as well as the Holy Synod, the Holy Clergy, and the faithful people in Greece, have never accepted the so-called ordination, if only as an external formal act, and see it as a forgiving prayer, and this is understood under the known conditions and terms. I refer to this great synod of 1981, because in the conclusion of your presentation, which you read out in it, you wrote the following: Your Eminences, let us also pay attention to the Athenite will of Metropolitan Nicholas of Piraeus and the islands, based on the Cheroth recognition of the Russian Church by the laying on of hands. Previously, in your introduction to the ordinations of 1948, you emphasized that their validity was also recognized by the Russian Synod under Metropolitan Filaret, and you referred to the letter of Metropolitan Filaret dated the 30th of September 1974. However, following, apparently, the intervention of the then Atticus Matthew, you remained silent and deleted the above paragraph from your text as if in an epilogue or footnote, and you did not bring up the issue of your apostolic council at that great special synod. You have therefore kept quiet about this burning issue because the then Atticus Matthew convinced you not to show this acquittal will of yours again, and not to confront it orthodoxly because you are needed for the courts, while that was also needed for our broader recognition and subordination, then to the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, and today for union in the New Old Calendar scheme, and within the framework of Old Calendar and New Calendar ecumenism. And my brother Matthew in 1995 became a schismatic heretic, and as such had the known end, dying and being buried. Why do you surpass him in treason? I believe that your current condemnation as a pseudo-archbishop is a consequence of this blasphemy of yours against ecclesiology and primarily against your apostolic succession, which blasphemy abolishes you not only as a bishop, but also as a member of the Church. Therefore, in 1976, when you signed the dethronement of Callistos because he accepted his restoration by the laying on of hands, you had, much worse, denied both the true Orthodox Church and the apostolic succession, because through the Parliament you accepted and confess a second church founded by Bresthenes in 1937, having separated from Florinis, etc. And you became a canonical and valid hierarch after the laying on of hands in 1971. That is, complete denial, slander, and blasphemy against both the true Orthodox Church and the apostolic succession, your succession. Attention, Your Eminence, for this acquittal you gave these exchanges. Is this why horror seizes us? Aye. In addition, and because of your attitude towards the 5 schismatic heretics who deposed and anathemaed you, both you personally as well as your like-minded people and companions, you did not take any canonical and orthodox action as you should have done. We can only consider you as simple monks and therefore not as orthodox. Be careful. Occasional and deliberate misleading confessions do not cover you, but also expose you as trying to deceive the faithful. If in this case you did not accept and do not accept this will, then in order for your claim to be proven true and the concealment and refusal to officially confront this to be dispelled, it is required that this be brought canonically to the Holy Synod to be decided by a special official, synodal ACT, which will be duly communicated wherever it sees fit and published. At the same time, consistency must be shown in all cases that indirectly or directly impinge on and affect ecclesiology and apostolic succession. Until today, however, you have not only concealed this blasphemous will, but you have also raged against everyone who has slandered it, In order that this may not be affected, both the canonical order and the synodical institution have been shaken, and you have also provoked intrigues and scandals, not by chance, precisely so that this ultimate blasphemy may not be confronted canonically, orthodoxly, and confessionally. In our opinion, this is the reason why the 5 schismatic heretics were not confronted with all that this entails. Neither the theological dialogue nor the orthodox mission was promoted, but the silencing of the ecclesiastical testimony continues, while conspiratorially, predatorily, and in a medieval way, you fake and commit injustice. And since May 2nd, 03, you have indeed collectively descended in abnormality in a holy place. Your Eminence, in my humble opinion, from the moment you accepted the 5476th Council, you have fallen, become self-condemned, become obscured, and in truth you have neither confession nor apostolic succession. You do not observe canonical order. You do not respect the synodal institution, nor do you rule over the issues of ecclesiology and apostolic succession, but only conspire. And as vainglorious ones, you have illegally, and not through the door, you have also ascended to the archiepiscopal throne, and by force you occupy churches in order to deprive them of the orthodox priests and bishops, and in one word, by the faithful fullness of the church. After all this, it is not possible for you to be considered as an orthodox hierarch of the true Orthodox Church, but as a peptokos, inferior to Callistos, and henceforth any ecclesiastical practice against you will have an exclusively confirmative character, and this for purely confessional and pastoral reasons. In order not to be long-winded, I will not refer to other key issues that concern you, nor to the false accusations that you forced third parties to file against me, but also against others. I will also not mention your false accusations, slander, threats, and blackmail against His Beatitude Archbishop Andrew in 1998, nor your abundant mistrust, nor your perverse, misguided, and completely false suggestions, both in February 2002 and in April 2003, for which alone, if you do not retract them, you are excommunicated for the second time because, as a person who has practiced falsehood, you have become an accomplice of the evil one. As for your malicious opinions, as I have already noted, clear and explicit complaints are already pending, and I have not yet made such a public statement, because not only you, but also your group, constitute a direct danger to the faithful remnant of the true Orthodox Church. Under these negative conditions and reasons, your participation and complicity in many conspiracies is interpreted and understood, and especially in the sacrilegious collusion regarding the resignation of His Holiness Archbishop Andrew in favor of your evidence, in exchange for expelling Metropolitan Kyriakon from his parish, that is, seizing it from him, as well as the parish of the Holy Trinity from Father Thomas. The transaction primarily provided for at least 2 episcopal ordinations from the environment of his beatitude, which you are avoiding for other reasons, but also in order to deny your irrefutable transaction, which was pre-agreed upon, and which was first revealed by Archbishop Andreas on May 2nd, 03, through his resignation. It should be noted that the purpose of this document, as I said at the beginning, was to make you understand that you must stop occupying the Holy Church of the Holy Trinity in Lower Heliopolis, 25 Hippocrates Street, to move away from it and the other facilities, and to limit yourself to your own buildings, which, allow us, do not belong to you, because it is time for you to realize that not only as an archbishop and president of the IFSCE you are not legitimized and are not recognized, but neither as a bishop nor as an orthodox member. After this, if you persist in further cultivating falsehood and deceit, and do not renounce your blasphemies and what is rightly and responsibly attributed to you, even to the point of barbaric appropriation, we will not remain silent, because this will mean our self-abolition as a theologian, and above all, as a faithful member of the Church. By the barbaric seizure, you prove yourself to be completely alienated from the spirit of orthodoxy, and that your hierarchical conscience has been killed. Otherwise, how dare you enter not simply as a thief into the parish of the Holy Trinity, for a thief commits theft and flees, but as a tyrant and as a ruthless tyrant, dominating, oppressing the Orthodox parishioners. How do you retain the Holy Temple and its facilities while persecuting the vicar and parishioners and preventing them from exercising their religious and worship duties? Do you realize that since December 8th, 2003, you have emerged as a cruel and ruthless tyrant, and that not only do you have no relationship with the true Orthodox hierarch, who should be in the type and place of Christ, but you also emerge in the type and place of the heretical persecuting bishops, who persecute the true and Orthodox bishops and the faithful to the point of extermination? In our opinion, you are no different from the heretical Arians and all the heretics throughout the centuries, who persecuted all Orthodox bishops, priests, monks, and believers to death. Your Eminences, it depends on you where sin and evil have abounded, that the grace of God may abound. We pray, at least at this stage, that you will assume the great and heavy personal responsibilities, but also those of your followers, while I assure you that I will gladly see you in person if you wish. I believe and hope that in a personal communication, without conditions, prerequisites, but according to the Lord's saying, where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there am I in the midst of them. It is possible for a miracle to happen, that is, let us hope for a miracle of God's grace. However, you know that we are not opposed. On the contrary, if there were no obstacles, we would gladly accept you as Archbishop and Patriarch. But now, however, we do not recognize you either as an Orthodox bishop or as an Archbishop, because A. With your apostolic will, 54/76, you betrayed your confession ecclesiology and your apostolic succession, worse than Callistos, and then that predecessor of yours, the pious flowering Keres, in order to redeem your exemption by giving your ecclesiology and apostolic succession in exchange. B. You have abandoned the canonical order and the synodal institution, and have committed and continue to commit crimes against the Church with your group. C. You did not confront the 5 schismatic heretics according to canonical order and orthodox ecclesiastical ethics. In this case, you gave the 5 so many souls so that they would be damned, while you also gave them churches which do not belong to you, and you never claimed the Metropolitan Church of St. John the Baptist in Athens, like others. But as a tyrant you rushed with your followers, religious thuggery, and occupied the parish church of the Holy Trinity in Lower Heliopolis, because Orthodox people remain there, namely, the majority of the parishioners and the parishioner and agoniste Frater Thomas. It is very clear that you have an order, since Bishop Kyriakos and Foster Thomas do not yield, to deprive them of the holy temples, forgetting that in the final analysis, take the houses, we will have the tenant, take the materials from us. Christ needs us, and no one can deprive us of him, unless, which would not be the case, we ourselves deny him. D. You have committed plots, coups, conspiracies, slandered, perpetrated persecutions, and remain unrepentant. E. You interrupted the theological dialogue with the Florinians, because it was not allowed to become a parody and a fiasco, so that through this new dialogue the apostolic succession would be betrayed. F. You do not have a clear confession, but sometimes morbidly and sometimes willfully, in order to deceive. You confess like perfect Pharisees, or like that former Florina Chrysostomos Kavourides. G. You are a heretic, a forger of the church history of the texts of the fathers, and you also remain unrepentant. H. You are considered, in our opinion, to be a dangerous egoist, vainglorious, and your character from every point of view seems rather like a Neronian. You are ultimately, as we believe, a victim of your own evil, at your disposal, with sincere Christian feelings. Eletherios Gkoutzidis, theology professor. It is absolutely clear that the exarchate of 1971, when I returned, unanimously declared, both through the mouth of Callistos of Corinth, as well as Mr. Epiphanios of Kishan and the other members, that the so-called laying on of hands was completely unrelated to the laying on of hands on schismatics, and that this had the status of a prayer of forgiveness and this extreme economy following the unity in confession ecclesiology, and out of love and for the benefit of unity, namely for the return of the schismatic heretics of Florin to the body of the Church, from the which was separated from them in 1937 by the former Florina Chrysostomos Kavourides. It is therefore clear and indisputable that the then Corinthian Callistos was deposed due to the withdrawal imposed on him by Kalliopeos, Kallinikos, etc., from his initial official confession declaration, as above by new self-secret, by which he was actually ordained as a schismatic. I repeat, this canonical and orthodox act of his deposition was also signed by you as Metropolitan of Piraeus. With these facts, Venerable Mr. Nicolaos, no one can doubt that from the facts you emerge as a truly orthodox and confessor hierarch. Unsuspectingly, then, you tell us naively, we did not seek the relevant will nor the relevant file with your basic apology memorandum, which should have been in the church archives, because in 1976 we still believed that the lips of a high priest do not lie. Today, however, you are obliged to make available to everyone the entire relevant file, which you certainly have in your archives. Your published memorandum, which you submitted to the investigating officer of the 4th Department of Piraeus on October 15, 1975, after much pressure, mentions your main apological memorandum to the Criminal Court of Athens of 15/28.10.1974, the content of which, however, we never saw. Why? Is this where the whole betrayal lies? Is it, in other words, that with this main memorandum, you invoke the never accepted as unimplemented and essentially rejected contradictory decision of the Russians of the diaspora? On the one hand, it writes about ordination according to Canon 8 of the First Ecumenical Council, that is, as for schismatics, while on the other hand it recognizes the ordinations that took place in 1948. I mentioned 1. Mrs. Soteria Charkianaki, 2. Mrs. Lamonia Panayotaki, 3. Mr. Apostolos Gatti, and finally, your own. About all of them, it is shameful to even say. You can see these in detail as well as their outcome in our publicly circulated issue under the title On an Unfortunate Action of His Honorable Metropolitan of Piraeus and the Islands, Mr. Nicholaios. Athens, the 29th of August, 1998. For this reason, we will use every canonical, orthodox, and lawful means to relieve the faithful fullness of the true Orthodox Church of Christ of such bishops who, as blasphemers and perjurers, verify for the bishops and synods of our time, or from that Calliston the 5 and up to you with your group, that which the holy Chrysostom confesses in holy indignation for the bishops and synods of his time, that no one has given as much as the bishops, except for a few. I take this opportunity to draw your special attention to the slanders and insults of your followers from August 12th, 03, PE, which contributed to the occupation of the parish church of the Holy Trinity, reminding you that these insults and slanders also constitute very serious criminal offenses. I emphasize that you, Your Excellency, are a moral author and a true editor, and as you understand, the sequel will not be pleasant for the slanderers and insulters who have insulted the honor and reputation not only of individuals but also of entire families. COP, January 2004.